Hey, welcome in, Stinkin Truth Podcast, alongside my partner, Mike Evans. I am Mark Schlereth. Always good to have you guys with us. Michael, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing great. This is a week that I love, but you probably hate. What do you call it? The Underwear Olympics?
Oh, yeah, the
Underwear
Combine?
Olympics.
Yeah, the Combine. Yeah, absolutely. I don't hate it. I don't know what its worth is. Like a test of athletic skills does not a football player make. Like, I always tell you that I don't really care about great athletes. I don't want professional athletes. I want professional football players. And so there are so many guys, if you look at the best 40s ever run at the Combine, if you take, the top 10 40s ever run at the Combine, there's probably two guys that are worth a crap. If you take the top 10 bench press tests at the Combine, there are probably two guys in there that were players, 8 guys that weren't. So the whole thought process of, oh man, we're gonna, really evaluate these athletes. Like the film tells you if a dude can play or a dude cannot play. I guess all that the athleticism does is put you into a category. Like, are you an elite level athlete or are you not an elite level athlete? But I just think so much more is made than probably should be made of what a guy runs, how, what his broad jump is. The broad jump shows explosiveness. Does it? Like, there are plenty of guys who weren't great benchers. There are plenty of guys who weren't great at the vertical jump that are unbelievable football players.
But there is stuff that is taken seriously, and maybe this falls under the category of being taken too seriously. A quarterback's size. Bryce Young, the presumptive number 1 overall pick, measured in at 5'11.5". And we've seen before a Baker Mayfield measurement, a Kyler Murray measurement, that if you get to that magical 6 feet, then instantly you could take him number 1 overall. Does a half an inch, does this hurt? Should it hurt Bryce Young?
The slight build to me is a little bit more concerning. He's like 190 pounds, right? I mean, he's a wee little dude. That's probably more concerning. And again, these are all, it was like Joe Burrow saying, hey, pray for my little tiny hands, right? Like Joe Burrow is
Sport
all
hands.
Right. He's got these tiny little hands, giant nuts, giant balls.
Yeah.
So I would go for the giant clackers over the tiny little hands.
That's right. Give me giant balls any day, right?
That should be the number 1 measurement. They just come in there and measure your clackers. This dude's got huge clackers, number 1 overall. Let's go. Like that would be the big takeaway. I think the height. I mean, not the size. The height of the quarterback is one of those things that then you have to start thinking about how you operate in kind of in that realm. Like offensively, how are we going to operate with a guy who is less than ideal height? Now, obviously, Drew Brees wasn't ideal quarterback height, but he's one of the best that's ever played. So you never know. I guess I start then to think about, how are we going to construct our football team? So if my guy doesn't have ideal height, he's not a 6'3", 6'4" guy, right? So now what do we have to do? Well, I would have to think that if I'm going to draft that guy, I better be stout, guard, center, guard. I better have guys that can play the up kick game, take the passive out of pass protection, attack the line of scrimmage, so that when my guy hits his 5th step, he can hitch up and still see, and still have room. Guys aren't sitting in his lap. The other thing I think that you start to do is you start to say, okay, as an offense, like if you look at an offense and you say, okay, there's this tight end to tight end box right here, okay? So we've got this is a tight end to tight end box, right there. And that's that completion percentage right there. If we go from tight end to ghost tight end, or, if we're in solo, so 2 tight end formations, 8 yards deep, right there. That box, that rectangle, that is about 80% completion. That's where you run your little spot routes. That's where you run little arrow routes, right? You just won't turn around. Your little hooks, right? You just turn around and you catch the ball right there. You should complete about 80% of your passes there. Well, guess what? If you're a 3-step drop team, you're a 5-step no-hitch drop team, and you're trying to complete passes right there, and you've got a quarterback that's less than ideal height, it's harder to see those. It's harder to complete those passes. So now do we have to change our offense a little bit to say, hey, man, what I want to do is if this is guard, center, guard, and, guard, center, guard, and that tackle sets here, now there's a window between guard, center, guard, bam, tackle sets. Now that window opens up. We need to make our quick passing game in that window, kind of like from the hash to the numbers window, because there's a natural little window that opens up for shorter quarterbacks there. So you have to take, I think, to me, you have to take all these things into consideration, how your team is built and whether that guy is going to be effective in that system.
Can you hand me that for a second, real quick? Listen, folks, if you'd like to sponsor the Stinking Good, we can actually have the money to buy a real telestrator. Yeah. So instead of doing it this way.
Well, I like, you know me, I like to doodle.
You like to doodle.
I like to doodle.
You like to doodle. Well, the one thing about the combine that does get done, deals get done, or at least the framework of deals get done. And the Chicago Bears have made it clear that the number one pick is open for business.
Right.
2 parts to this. One, they're making a commitment to Justin Fields. Smart?
Yes. Yeah, I had the opportunity last year to do a Chicago Bears game early in the year and a Chicago Bears game late in the year. And watching just that maturity, that growth, not only as a football player, but as a human. Like, Justin Fields grew up last year, and his ability to articulate what he's trying to do, his ability to understand what they're trying to do as an offense, I thought there was no question that when you talk to him, you could see that growth. You could see that he went from boom to boom, right? He jumped up from his overall understanding and acumen, just the football acumen, the football understanding, what they were trying to do as an offense. And then you look at them overall from just a pure talent level, you would say that they were fairly marginal talent-wise. They earned that number one overall pick, but they were playing a lot of young guys, and you could see the potential of those young guys growing into really good football players. So this, to me, is kind of a no-brainer. Take that number one pick, move down, move off of that, parlay that into multiple picks so that you can build and construct your football team. Because what you see is an exceptional athlete, a gifted athlete in an offense that takes advantage of that athleticism. And what you saw was him with great growth as a player. Like, I explained this, like, to me, one of the first games I did was probably like week 4, week 5 Chicago. And I think on the broadcast I explained it like this. Like, you watch enough of his film, it's almost like an amateur's golf game. There's 3 or 4 or 5 drives that you look at and like, what the hell was that? There's always those 4 or 5 throws that you're like, dude, really? But then there's that one you pipe down the middle at 305 yards, and you're like, oh, I got this figured out. Mm-hmm. Like, every now and again, that dude will pipe one 315. It's just amazing. And that's what you kept seeing here. So you're like, if he could harness this on a more consistent level, harness that kind of ability, because the ability's there, but harness that kind of accuracy, that kind of timing, those things as he grows in this offense. And that's what I saw, like, early. It was just a couple of throws a game that he would make that you go, wow, that's really good. But then there were like 15 of them that you're like, ugh, that doesn't look good. It was the later in the season, week 12, week 13, it was exactly the opposite. There were 15, 16, you're like, wow, that's really good. There was only a handful that were bad. And so you saw the growth. So I think it's a smart decision by Chicago to go in this direction and to fortify their team and to build their team around his exceptional skill set at this point.
Yeah, and it's definitely the potential that you're looking at right now, but you realize there is, at some point, there's a ceiling he has to bust through, kind of like where Lamar Jackson is at this point. And you've talked about this, the Lamar smear campaign, the idea that, hey, maybe Lamar, in the eyes of the Ravens, has sort of peaked. He's a running quarterback that's somewhat limited as a passer, and that's why they don't want to make the big-time financial commitment. Where does the fact that he doesn't have an agent come into all this? Because you're starting to hear that part of the argument now, that, hey, Lamar's not getting a deal done because he doesn't have an agent, and he's trying to do it by himself.
I heard a debate on the Four Letter Network the other day that was about, hey, if he had an agent, this deal would be done. Really? Because an agent's gonna the chasm between where the Baltimore Ravens are in guaranteed money and where Lamar Jackson is in guaranteed money, it's over $100 million. So an agent's going to bridge that chasm? Like all of a sudden it's going to be like, okay, now that you have an agent, you're right. We would like to pay you an extra $100 million.
What if
in
you had
guarantees.
Jerry Maguire?
Yeah, okay.
Huh?
If he show me the money, Yeah, right?
Huh? Come on now.
Now you're thinking.
Now I'm thinking that $100 million gets made up just like that.
Just like that. Nothing flat. I don't think it really has anything to do with having an agent or not. This has to do with what Lamar Jackson believes his market value is, and why would he not believe it? The Cleveland Browns and Jimmy Haslam, which is a whole nother issue. Jimmy.
New owner of the Milwaukee Bucks?
Right. Dude, you own the Browns and you own the Milwaukee Bucks. It is time to change your name to James. You cannot continue to go down.
Or at least Jim.
Right. You can't keep going down Jimmy.
Yeah.
Jim, Jiminy, Jim, Jeru. Like, come on. Jimmy. That's like, you should graduate to James. Like, at least you have some, because you're not winning anything. Dude, you've never been able to win. Except your Flying J truck stops. They won, obviously. But for crying out loud, it's time. So I digress. But going back to Lamar and his contract demands, like, it is not Lamar's fault that Jimmy set the precedent when it comes to money with Deshaun Watson and that $230 million guaranteed contract. So what he's saying is, dude, if that dude's worth it, now – what you're fighting is you're fighting collusion.
What? There's collusion in the NFL among owners?
Because
tell me it ain't so.
Once that contract went down, obviously, the old boys network got together, right?
They did not like it.
No, I mean there are no minutes. There were no meeting with minutes, or there's no emails or text messages. But they got together in a closed room without any. You put your cell phones in a basket. And you went in that closed room and said, ain't nobody going to sign another one of those deals, right? So you've seen since then Kyler Murray get signed. You saw Russell Wilson get signed. You've seen there's probably another quarterback or two that got maybe
well, you've had Dak Prescott got paid, and all these quarterbacks, even Josh Allen.
Yeah, Josh Allen.
They're all kind of getting money, guaranteed money in that
165-ish.
About 130 to 165 range.
Right.
Nobody's coming close to the 232, 235 that Deshaun Watson got,
right.
And I just don't think that there is an owner out there that's going to break ranks. And I think Steve Bisciotti was critical of the Deshaun Watson contract. So you think he's going to turn around and give Lamar Jackson one that's bigger than that?
Yeah, I think what you're fighting is you're fighting an ownership group that just basically says, Jimmy Haslam's out there on his own island, right, and we can't stand that dude, and we'd like to push him out. But he's part of the group, and he did something that was incredibly insane, and we're not going to follow suit. So that's where they sit right now. But to sit there and intimate that Lamar Jackson would have a contract if only he had an agent, I just think it's foolish. Lamar knows what his value is, and he's saying, pay me this value. And you know what? Frankly, on the flip side of that, the Baltimore Ravens look at Lamar and say, you're not worth it. I mean, that's what they're saying is, hey, we love you. We love you at this number. But from a longevity standpoint, what we do as an offense with you is not sustainable. You've already proven the last 2 years you've missed time. We've had to pare down the run game. And, frankly, when we're running the snot out of the ball and we're doing all those things and we're getting single high post safety, so we know outside you're getting one-on-ones on a consistent basis, so we can run the slants, we can run the over routes, we know what we're getting, we're good. Like, you can throw those. That's great. But we don't believe in you when it comes to when we take that away. Now, they've signed a new offensive coordinator, Todd Monken, who's Monken, however you say his name. But, no more Greg Roman. So they're trying to transition, I believe, to more of a drop-back passing game. But what the Baltimore Ravens are I'm not saying this. The Baltimore Ravens are saying, we don't believe that you can do that on a consistent basis. Therefore, we are not paying you that kind of money.
Derek Carr needs an agent because there are a lot of teams interested in Derek Carr. He's already met with a couple of teams in the Saints and Jets. He's also going to meet with the Panthers, and there's expected to be other teams that are interested in Derek Carr as well. If you had to predict, call your shot right now, Mark Schlereth, where does Derek Carr end up?
It's a great – Derek's got to feel like the girl in high school that has 7 prom dates right now, right? Like, everybody wants to ask her to the prom. Derek Carr has got a bunch of suitors, and rightfully so. God, I think you have to look at situations. You just left the Raiders. You've got Nathaniel Hackett as the offensive coordinator. You've got a guy that as a head coach with the Jets, Robert Saleh, that I absolutely love. But how is that situation? Great defense, some young, talented offensive pieces and weapons. Like, I think the Jets is a lot better situation than I think people probably on the outside give it credit for. Indianapolis would be a really interesting, you want to talk about offensive line, pretty put together, young receiving core, but not overly established or overly talented, but a young receiving core. I think you can build young tight end over there that I think is Woods is a big skilled guy. They got a receiver out there in Pittman that I think has got the potential to be really good. That one would intrigue me a little bit in a AFC South that, come on, is Houston is bad.
Are you confident saying that Carr, this isn't going to be a guy that's just looking for the bag?
No.
This is a guy that at this point in his career, he understands it's now about establishing some sort of a legacy, right? And he wants to go somewhere where he can win. He's not just chasing the buck, right?
Right. And it's not only about the players around you. It's not only about the roster, and the roster is important. There's no question. But I think philosophically, the coach, Frank Reich in Carolina, makes a lot of sense. They'd be kind of evenly yoked, both Christian guys. Their faith is important. That would be one that I think would appeal to Derek Carr. Smaller market. NFC South is, come on, the Saints are Tampa, what? Atlanta, do you really believe in Ritter? You walk in right now, if Derek Carr walks in that situation in Carolina, one, he's already the best quarterback in that division, right?
Yep.
Yep. I mean, you got a chance right now to produce. So that one on the surface to me seems to make a lot of sense.
Washington, I know you're always paying attention to what's going on with your old team, and they've made some changes. Eric Bieniemy in as the offensive coordinator. Carson Wentz is out.
Right.
His gypsy nomadic trek around the NFL continues. Who's next up for him? But so Washington, are we looking at Sam Howell?
Well, last year, I did a handful of Washington games last year, probably maybe 3 or 4, maybe even 5, more than a handful. As a matter of fact, it was really cool. Washington, the Commanders, had called up Fox. One of the late games in the season, they were playing the Cleveland Browns, and they were honoring the Hogs. So they called up Fox and said, "Hey man, could you have Stink come down and do this game? We would really like him to do this game." And so, worked out in the schedule, and Fox arranged that so I go out and do that game. And I got honored at the beginning of the game, along with a bunch of the other Hogs. Russ Grimm and Jeff Bostic was there, Raleigh McKenzie and Ed Simmons and Ray Brown and myself, and it was really cool. It was good. Donnie Warren was there. Mark Rippon showed up. Doug Williams showed up. So it was really cool, kind of honoring the Hogs. And then I did the stand-up. You know how you do the pregame before you do. I did it on the field with a stick mic. It was cool. And then they shuttled me up in a little cart, and I ran off to the elevator, and went upstairs. And it was really a fun thing. But that week, it was one of the last games of the season, December game, I think, probably late December game. I ended up talking quite extensively about Sam Howell and how much they love. Now, of course, when he looks like the only option you got, everybody falls in love with the dude, right? But you could tell they were off of Carson Wentz. This was a failed experiment. Heineke, who they love, and everybody loves Heineke. He's
just a ceiling.
He's everybody's favorite backup.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I just, again, that's kind of what they felt like. This kid is super talented. He can really throw the ball. He's smart. He's all these things. So there was that selling point of Howell's going to be, that's where we're going. That's going to be our guy.
What do they like about him?
I just think they feel like he has got it. Like he's got the ability just to let it eat, the ability to throw it with touch, a great understanding of the game. I just think they like all those things about him. Now, again, all those things are great when you're running a scout team or that's what Kansas City loved about Mahomes. They would be like, man, he's just tearing. He's a third-string quarterback when they drafted him, even though he's a 10th overall pick, and he's just tearing them up in practice. And they got really excited. Like right now, their new offensive coordinator, Matt Nagy, who was there and then went to Chicago, he was there. He said, "Hey man, when we drafted Mahomes, it's like the coaches would run, not walk, but run to the film room." And before they watched the rest of the film, they would watch Mahomes just cutting up their defense from a scout team. They'd be like, dude, this guy's incredible. And so I'm not calling him Mahomes, but I'm saying he's got some of those qualities that jump off the film, the way he throws the ball and the way he kind of understands the game.
So in the spirit of this being Combine Week, and you just mentioned the Hogs, can you share the story of the first question you got asked? Now, you didn't go to the Combine.
No, I did not get invited to the Combine.
But you did get visited by teams, and they interviewed you Combine style. So can you share the story of your first experience with Washington, the team that ended up drafting you?
So the first time I show up to my buddy Marvin Washington's workout, I would not have played in the National Football League if it wasn't for Marvin Washington. He invited me to all his workouts. And so I would show because I didn't have an agent. I had nothing, right? No agent. I had no real interest. I had been injured my whole career. I played 1 year on the offensive side of the ball. That was it. So Marvin calls me up and invites me in Washington, came to work him out. And there's a guy by the name of Torgy Torgensen, who was the defensive line coach, and a guy by the name of Billy Devaney, who went on to become a GM in the league for a long time. Billy was the GM for the St. Louis Rams for a long time. They came to work me out. They were there working out Marvin and kind of introduced myself and did that thing. So anyhow, ran ridiculous 40s and vertical jumps and all the stuff that I just complained about, but that's what
got you on the radar.
Right, got me on the radar.
Yeah.
They actually worked me out.
What a hypocrite.
Right, no.
What a hypocrite.
They actually worked me out as a tight end. They were throwing balls to me
Really?
Running. Oh yeah, I was running in
And
motion.
you caught them?
Oh yeah, come on, Mike. I'm a professional athlete, Mike.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yes.
So anyhow, that's what they had come back with a report. Hey man, this guy could play tight end, blah blah blah. And so then they sent out, Billy and Joe Bugle came back out to work me out individually on my own. So over 8-10 workouts with Marvin inviting me to his workout, I had drawn enough interest or created enough buzz that then teams started coming to work me out individually. And so I'm working out for Washington, do the same thing, and their O-line coach, Joe Bugle, legendary O-line coach, is working me out. And so we get done with the workout. It's a great workout. And he goes, hey, Big Horse. He used to call you Big Horse. Oh, Big Horse. Stud. Oh, stud. Man, you look good, stud. You're born to play football, weren't you? Look at you, stud. He goes, let me ask you a question, Horse. He goes, Horse or stud? And let me ask you a question. He goes, you like to drink beer? And I'm like, how do you answer that? You're like, oh yeah, I'm a real lush. Me and the boys are always drunk, right? Yeah, like you don't want to go that far, right?
Yeah.
But you don't want to say no. I don't drink any beer at all, right? You don't want to. So you're trying to figure it out. And so I was like, the boys have some beers every now and again. Yeah, we enjoy tipping a few back, I guess. So, trying. He goes, well, that's good because you come to Washington. You got to drink a lot of beer with the Hawks. Those guys love to drink beer. So you're going to be drinking a lot of beer with them, right?
Passed your test.
Right. I was like, oof, good. So, yeah, that was the question that I got from Joe Bugle. Like, but all that, I don't know. What if you had to ask one question?
Yeah.
Like you're the interviewer and you got to ask one question to a guy. Like, what are you going to ask?
Yeah, there's some really bizarre questions that get asked. Although, real quick, put a capper on that because the Marvin Washington story. You love, I don't know, sports karma or just the idea that you do the right thing, it'll come back and it'll benefit you. Marvin Washington was a defensive lineman, and he invited you to these workouts in part so he'd have somebody to go up against, right?
Well, he invited me simply because he knew that I had no interest. Like, he knew that I was a really good football player, but he knew that I had been injured my whole college career. I mean, we're good buddies. Like, to this day, we're good buddies.
So how did you kind of reward him?
Yeah.
Thank him down the line.
The coolest part of that story, the whole pay it forward aspect. Like, I honestly, had it not been for Marvin Washington, I wouldn't have not played in the NFL. There's no question that I would have never played in the NFL if it not for Marvin Washington inviting me to his workouts so I could get on the radar. And then teams started working me out. So fast forward, I'm through year 7, year 8, and we go on to win Super Bowl 32. Green Bay Packers, Denver Broncos 34. I don't know what the score would you
31-24.
31-24, thank you. Broncos win 31-24. And actually, Super Bowl 32, played on January 25th, 1998, was my 32nd birthday. I'm January 25th born. So I won.
File that away, people.
Super Bowl 32 on my 32nd birthday. So I'm spending the majority of my time in the offseason where I normally spend the majority of my time in the offseason, which was in the training room, laying around with ice on my back or my knee or whatever it was that was bothering me at the time. And Mike Shanahan comes down, and he's got a sheet of paper. And he said, hey, Stink, I need to ask you a question. He goes, we need a guy that can be a rotational defensive lineman for us, a guy that can play D-end, a guy that can play defensive tackle, a rotational guy, just a piece. He's going to play 13, 20 snaps tops a game. But we need a guy. And he goes, like, I got a list of 7 dudes that are free agents. I don't know any of them well. You've played in the league for a long time. You'd know all these guys. He goes, the most important thing is not so much about being a great player, but a guy that would be a great Bronco, a guy that would just fit our locker room. So he goes, he hands me this piece of paper. He goes, tell me who you think. So I get the piece of paper. I look at it and go, sign this guy, Marvin Washington. I go, sign him. So Mike goes, done. Leaves, walks back up to his office, signs Marvin Washington. And so Marvin got me into the National Football League. Marvin, I would have not played a minute in the National Football League if it not for Marvin Washington. And I got to return the favor by getting Marvin Washington a Super Bowl ring. We won Super Bowl 33 together as teammates, former University of Idaho teammates that won a Super Bowl together as Broncos teammates.
I think it's a great story to tell here during Combine Week. The
right.
background, the backstories of some of these guys who are trying to make it in the NFL and hopefully do make it in the NFL and the stories behind it. I think it's kind of cool. That's a really cool one.
It's one of the things I love just about sports in general is the brotherhood and the bond that you create is a lifelong brotherhood and a lifelong bond of sacrifice for one another. Yeah. And that's what makes team sports so special, and that's why we love sports.
Enjoy your combine, everybody.
Yeah, enjoy that. Hey, for everybody involved in the Stinkin Truth Podcast, we thank you so much for listening. For Mike, I am Mark. We'll be back with you later on this week.